don't know your numbers, you don't know your business. I learned this the hard way with my first company. So I created NetSuite, the world's #1 cloud business system. NetSuite gives you the visibility and control you need to make smart decisions and grow with confidence. That's why companies who use NetSuite grow 3 times faster than the S&P 500.
Schedule your free product tour right now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Digital Leader Show. We're live the first and third Wednesday of every month at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific, talking key issues and news at the intersection of business and technology in hopes of making you a better digital leader. Today, we're discussing our Lamb's The Death of Automation, plus other headlines for digital leaders. First, a quick thank you to our sponsor, Oracle NetSuite. NetSuite helps businesses automate core processes and provide real-time visibility into operational and financial performance. ERPA AI members and followers can receive special pricing and assistance. Go to erpaai.com/NetSuite for more information. I'm Dan Goodstein. I head up ERPA AI and the Digital Enterprise Institute. We're a professional association, media, and peer-to-peer research network, providing education, networking, and advice to over 130,000 members worldwide, all around automation, enterprise AI, and digital transformation. My co-host is Carlos Alvarenga, a researcher, author, coach, chair of our new Technology Innovation Board, and previously senior research fellow and professor at the University of Maryland, and has held leadership roles at World 50, EY, and Accenture. Good afternoon, Carlos.
Good to see you, Dan. Great to be back from the discussion today with our guest.
How's your week?
It's been good. It's interesting. I've spent this morning reading about this open letter of former OpenAI leaders and employees that are warning about the future of AI. So I thought it was a good research for our conversations today. So, at some point, all these people who make these things, right, saying, let's be careful about what we're making, you would think it would begin to raise bigger alarms than it is. So, but yeah, I continue to follow this issue of the people who are saying, we're not really sure what we're doing, so why are we doing it? But other than that, everything's great.
Everything other than the doomsday man.
Becoming
the doomsday man,
life as we know it. Everything's
well. Speaking of alarms, I saw this piece this morning on deep fakes and synthetic voices kind of coming for the financial space. So I guess it's not a big surprise, but one of the first targets for all of these hacks and crimes ends up being banks and financial centers. It's the easiest access to money, I guess. And so they're saying that some of these fake AI voices and deep fakes are tricking what they thought was sophisticated voice recognition technology in call centers and things like that to identify you, right? So I've
turned down. I've been asked 3 or 4 times in the last 6 months to use voice as an ID, right? And I always turn it down. It seemed to me much easier actually to fake somebody. I guess maybe I was right than even something like a complex password, right? So I didn't know where this whole voice thing was coming from. It seemed like it's not that secure, but again, I guess it's not. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's a report that's come out from this. There's a security tech company called Pindrop, and they're saying 70% of people in within some of these institutions and call centers for these institutions are concerned about the use of deepfakes and voice clones. That's certainly something that I think the people that upgraded to this technology for security purposes are rethinking that.
Yeah, I agree. Right, that was one that seemed pretty shaky from the word go, so it doesn't surprise me.
And in the trend we've been talking about around licensing for AI, Shutterstock, Bloomberg had an article about Shutterstock is kind of reigniting their growth, licensing their images to train AI models. So I was surprised by this number. They made $100 million last year through licensing deals. A lot of it was through OpenAI. They just announced another deal with another AI company, Rika, I guess it is, Rika AI. So we're seeing this trend of not just the journalism and media sites, but now others, I guess you'd say.
I guess it's the ones who are happy and the ones who are not. I think the New York Times has a lawsuit against OpenAI There may be others because of the copyright issue, right? That they acknowledge basically that they're taking content which is being created by other people, not compensating for that creation and using it to train their model. So like with any technology, you've got the people who are happy with where it's going, the content creators, like myself included, who whatever we create, right, it's going to be absorbed, and I'll never see a dime of royalties. Like I'm going to assume from OpenAI, even if it takes you 3 years to do something, it all disappears in a few seconds, right?
Yeah. So, and the other kind of headline that got my attention this morning was because I feel like a lot of times we talk about this stuff anecdotally, or we talk about it from a consumer standpoint, but the majority of our network is B2B, right? So there's this piece this morning that I saw about PwC becoming ChatGPT's biggest user and only official reseller of the platform. So PwC has committed $1 billion investment to Gen AI development over the next 3 years. They say they're going to focus on software development, purchase orders, document summarization, focusing on clients with heavy document heavy processes. And not only are they selling these solutions, but they're educating their employees on using this supposedly at scale. So they're approaching it as a tool to enhance the productivity of employee engagement. There's about 9,000 PwC users currently engaged in sharing AI concepts and contributing to what they call dynamic AI-driven work culture. That's a pretty big shift for a firm that's traditionally made money by selling butts and seats, right?
Well, there's so much content creation in a consulting company like PwC or Accenture or any of their peers, right? You think about having to write reports to clients. Think about having to document projects. Think about proposal work, which consumes thousands and thousands of hours, right? There've always been issues with knowledge management because if you finish a project, theoretically, a lot of times they want you to write it up so others can learn from that. That doesn't really happen most of the time, or not enough. I think Accenture is probably the best example of doing that. So if all of a sudden something can be put in and say, tell me about the project, right? And I'll write up the report for the launch manager, or tell me about this deliverable, that deliverable, you're going to free up, I would imagine at the PwC level, right, millions of hours that can be used for something else. No consultant that I've ever met wanted to sit there and do documentation. So if just that, or proposal writing, right? If you say, okay, I want you to look at the last 200 winning proposals. What were the parts that they have in common or that we think is useful? That doesn't happen, right? In most consulting firms, it's just the partner or the director, whoever happens to know what was done in the last year or two or the last 4 or 5 years. Well, at least when I was a consultant, there wasn't much intelligence in terms of proposals and documentation that I had at my disposal. If this comes along and changes that, which we always say, right, that the real thing is giving a memory inside the company, which is both great but also dangerous, right? So what does the company know? You and I know there are very few companies that know what they know.
Right.
Right? They know something, right? But what exactly do we know? You think about a place like BlackRock, Goldman Sachs. What does Goldman Sachs, the entity Goldman Sachs, not somebody who works there, but what does the corporation itself know? Maybe we're at the cusp of now being able to give companies, we've been giving companies rights for a long time, right? And we find companies not people anymore. And so we think of them as nice or not nice, ethical or not ethical. Maybe AIs will now give something like Goldman Sachs a mind, a memory, which would be a pretty remarkable line to cross. Mm-hmm.
So the last thing I wanted to mention before we ask our guest for this week to join us is, in my constant effort to debate with you, Carlos, and stump the researcher. I never have the stats as handy as you do, but we talked a lot about AI and CX and AI agents last week. And so I saw a couple of stats this week that I thought were interesting in my quest to have a good debate with you. One is Klarna, the finance company Klarna, announced that 2/3 of their customer interactions are now being handled by AI agents. And Intercom has come out with this kind of what they call AI first customer service platform. And they're claiming that half their customers have had issues resolved by AI in a matter of seconds, and that support team efficiency is up like 30%. So some examples of AI being at least supposedly better than a human interaction.
On the other hand,
You're not prepared. So I just
I am prepared because
got you with that.
a couple of people I know who are at the like we talked about the luxury kind of sector, right? What I heard from them was that you're 100% right. Quote unquote 1965 level service is really what I want. I'm offended if I check into a really great hotel and have to order through an iPad. That's ridiculous, right? I won't do it. so we're, like I said last week, we're both right.
I think you just you're more luxury than me, Carlos.
You're
more bougie than me.
It's not me, it's people I know. But I think that we're both right. I think for a large segment, it's better. But for the ultra premium segment, I think it's a different story.
You sound like a consultant again. It depends.
Well,
it depends.
I guess, but then what doesn't, right? So
we've I want to segue to our main topic today, which is LAMs, and I feel like we all just caught up to the excitement of large language models and the tech behind ChatGPT and its competitors, and now there's already excitement brewing about the next wave, large action models. So I wanted to invite one of our favorite and go-to experts, Kieran Gilmurray. He's an AI and automation expert, speaker, author, 7-time LinkedIn top voice. He's also research director for AI and automation at Bloor Research, and his resume goes on and on. Kieran, good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you. I'm glad I'm with quality guests as well, Carlos. I like to think of myself as sophisticated, but if we have to rough it with Dan, let's do that for the next period of time.
I think I said bougie. I don't know if I said sophisticated, but
I know what you meant. I was
Carlos is my academic mentor, I think, research mentor. So, Kieran, you've been around, you've been a friend and industry thought leader for a long time. I think, I've known you since the early days of RPA, and then intelligent automation, and then, early AI, Gen AI, and now this. So, give us a sense for those who are looking at this saying, I'm confused. Are we talking about sheep here? What's a LAM, and what's the acronym, and how is it different than LLMs? And then we can jump into kind of how this applies to our industry.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. We're bad as an industry, aren't we, for putting acronyms in absolutely everything. I feel so sorry. I must do a post on that at some stage and write it in a really horrible way. But look, we know what large language models do now, I believe. So they demonstrate skill at creating what you might call human-like text, images, and speech, and they're remarkably accurate, or getting more accurate. So large action models, or LAMs, are the latest developments in the world of AI. I say the latest because it keeps happening. They're kind of sophisticated agents that perform actions on the data that they get from the large language models. So now we have AI systems able to comprehend the natural language instructions and then execute those actions autonomously. So, Carlos, we do have to worry about this one. So we're moving beyond just answering a question, because ultimately when you get the text out of an LLM, nothing's going to happen. Now we're talking about the ability to autonomously execute complex multi-step processes based on the algorithm's understanding of the intent. So arguably you go back in the day and say AlphaZero, developed by DeepMind, was a large action model that learned how to play games like chess and Go by playing millions of games against itself, then optimizing its actions and outcomes without human intervention. But if you put it into very practical terms these days, LLMs produce output. So what? Now what do we do with it? Well, imagine that all of a sudden you produce an output around a trip abroad, and it goes away and actually books the flight, books the hotels, sorts out the cabs, sorts out an entire itinerary by visiting websites and every other application that you want. So now we're able to bridge that gap between the output, the understanding of the output, and then the execution of the output itself. And there's lots of cases of where that will work. And again, for a moment, it's kind of similar to RPA and intelligent automation, just a little bit more intuitive, and it's trying to work out intent and go that little bit further, as you currently experience with a large language model.
Hey, Kieran, I was reading earlier this year about a kind of showcase part that was done by T-Mobile and Brain. I think it's an AI company, and it was an appless phone. So the OS itself it had an infinite number of reconfigurations, right? If you want to travel, it became a travel app. You want to weather, it becomes a weather app. And I was reading about this Rabbit device, heading ahead of the show, and it reminded me of the same thing, where Rabbit becomes sort of this interface in between you and whatever else is. And you get the sense of death of apps, which I say is somewhere around the corner. And then to your point, that now it is the algorithm acting on another algorithms, right? So it's the machine now looks at what the other machines do, and it decides what is the best course of action. Is it really that's the vision that you say, I booked me a trip to wherever, and then it just goes out and does everything theoretically, and then comes back and says, here's your itinerary. Unless you change something, I'm going to go book it in the next hour.
Yeah, it literally is that. The Rabbit was out earlier on the year to great acclaim. It's doing the same thing. It reminds me, do you remember back in the day, the Star Trek thing where you talked and it just did?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The Rabbit, it's the same difference here. And I love appless devices, for want of a better phrase. And that's a bit where I start to see, okay, if we're really going to make sense of this tooling and technology, and for years, Carlos, we've talked about digital assistants. And now we're talking about maybe, and I use the word maybe, getting into a position where you and I have this thing, and again, I want to put a layer of caution around this, constantly monitoring and watching what we're doing, interpreting that. Over time, we're very patternistic as people. We like to think of ourselves as unique individuals, and then we end up doing the same thing, eating the same pizza, watching the same shows, and at work, we end up trying to do the same things. So if we have something there working with us, either as a device, a piece of software on the desktop, something cloudless, I imagine as well, then it's doing exactly as you're describing, interpreting, going and booking and doing everything for us. And that I'm kind of excited about, because if I look at my actual day and I break it down, I love to constantly hack at it to say, look, if I'm doing things that aren't revenue generating, get rid of them, and I'm handing them to other people. But I'd love to hand it to an AI that was actually sophisticated enough to go and do it. And this goes back to one of the things, and I want to talk about two parts. One of the things Sam Altman said a while ago, you could have $1 billion organization ran by one person. When you walk that through, earlier on, you were talking about fake voices. Well, let's go on the positive side of that to a certain degree. Fake voice, fake image, fake everything. Well, why can't I have Kieran Gilmurray as me, the trainer, delivering in 57 languages somewhere? Why can't I have me as, it looks like me, it sounds like me, as the accountant, as the procurement person, as the travel agent? All these things are starting to get technically possible, where you can see me, not see me, hear me, not hear me. All of this could technically happen autonomously, which sounds great. And I'm all for it, by the way. And I'm aiming to try and put as much AI and digital into my business, because I don't particularly want, for want of a better phrase, human cost. That's expensive. If the technology's there, I do want to be able to use it. But imagine if every business on planet Earth adopted that same mindset, then all of a sudden we hand over a lot of control to automation that's interpreting what it is that it thinks we want. That's number one, danger number one. We have too much faith in the AI, danger number two, and we know where that's got us in the past. And number three is, well, when you look at the taxable income coming in from knowledge workers, and this probably with LLMs and ChatGPT and every derivative of it is one of the first times that we've been under attack. Well, jobs are going to be impacted, which means the tax revenues from governments are going to be impacted, which means where do we pay for all these people who are getting slightly older at the moment, including all of us?
I was just going to say, Carlos, it seems to me, reading through, this piece that was in The Verge and some others about it, the main differences between maybe what we have now and even with the LLMs, the ChatGPT, is it starts integrating the apps to a point where you can almost create what we'd say in the enterprise world a workflow across multiple apps and tasks and maybe even some orchestration, right, to use another of our industry terms. But I'm thinking, Carlos, back to when we did one of our first shows on Gen AI and we were talking about the impact on the workforce, we were talking about the fact that you would need a more sophisticated person, expert, to ask it the right questions, get some information back, and then implement that information from an LLM, from ChatGPT. Is this getting rid of that?
Well, one of the things that strikes me is this, and I'll start with a strange thing. I can name about 3 trees. Okay. I know what an oak is. I know what a pine tree is. Maybe like a willow, but it's probably a half dozen. At some point in humanity, it was impossible to not know hundreds and hundreds of trees, right? But we urbanized and we stopped caring about whether this is that tree, and then eventually wind up almost destroying the environment, right? Because I think that had a factor. We just didn't know about it, so we didn't care that much about it. You think about cars, right, or mechanical devices. There was a time where most people understood what an internal combustion engine is. We're entering an age when nobody will know what it is, and so it won't even care anymore. So the question for me is, when we start distancing the human mind from certain actions, right, there's a kind of empathy that is lost. There's a kind of cognition that's lost. So what do we replace that with? What are we going to, where is the benefit of not booking a flight? Where is the benefit of not knowing how to compare airfares or judge hotels? Where is the cognitive benefit of Rabbit, where you sit back and it's like Wall-E, right? Where you just say, do something, and you have can you imagine 100 years from now, Karen, we have no idea how a meal is made? Right?
No, it's a scary bit. And when you walk that through jobs, like let's take a lawyer, for example,
Right.
Always a good one to bash, but I adore lawyers. How they learn is by putting in those 80-hour weeks, and they learn the basics and they work their way up. Technically now with large language models and LAMs, they don't even need to do that. So how do we actually create the experts of the future in roles who understand the consequences of the things that they're actually doing before they become presumed experts by being told by a large language model what it is they're meant to know? You wouldn't hire someone. We're going to destroy things. And it is that piece. I do worry about that, Carlos, because I don't use an abacus anymore to count, and I don't care. I use a calculator to do long division, and I don't care about the math. What I want is the outcome. And that seems correct. But to your point, if you look at how we're almost training our brains these days, everything has to be shorter, quicker, faster, better. We're now stopping to think about what's even happening. We'll walk that through. When dynamite was invented 100 and something years ago, everybody thought this was great. We'll clear mountains, we'll clear roads, we'll connect cities together. Families will suddenly be connected where they couldn't be. Commerce will expand. Well, look how that turned out. Now we have AI, and to your point earlier on, both of you were describing this. We need to start thinking ethically through all of those consequences. And I'm not one for suggesting that we slow down innovation. Certainly not. I'm not pro-regulation. I'm pro-understanding what's coming around the corner so we don't step in the doo-doo of AI, because there are a shed load of consequences that are really good, and there's a shed load of consequences that are really bad to all of the AI coming out, the existing LLMs, LAMs, and everything else that we know that's going to follow onwards. I don't think, to your point earlier on, people understand the models, because if we're dealing with billions of data points, how possibly could you? And if we're going to use AI to design AI, to your point, Daniel, to get actually, that's the bit where RPA, it's potentially an improvement on it. We don't actually now have to think. We want the AI to work out to replicate what we're trying to do, to mirror that, and we'll not even understand how it all works. That bit there is concerning, and I don't have a perfect answer for that yet.
And just the last thought here, I worry about what is lost in this evolution. I had to do a project for one of my grad classes to letterpress print a book. If you've never letterpress printed a book, where you have to set every single letter, every comma, every line by hand. The thing and it will take you an hour to set a page, right? When it was over, what occurred to me was that if every writer knew that they had to set every letter, our writing would be infinitely better. It'd be more economical. It'd be more thoughtful. You would, having to print your book would make you a better writer. Now, we don't, for all the reasons that we don't, but something was lost in not having to compose, right, the printed word and not just the typed word in Microsoft Word. And I just wonder, right,
but I wonder, Carlos, if that's a bit of a paradox, right? Because I get the point, but the other part of that is the idea or the promise behind, without getting into a whole philosophical thing, behind AI, is that it frees us up to do better things. And in your case, my case, maybe we have more time to think. If we're not sitting there typing letters out, we have more time to
have a question.
To be a liberal arts person, right?
What? Let's take an example. what did we become better at because of the iPhone? Name one thing as a species.
Not going to a bank. That immediately made my life better.
as a species, right?
Yeah.
What in our minds and our bodies, what did we become better at because of the iPhone?
Well, I don't know if I have a definitive answer for that, but if I look at pre-iPhone, when I'm going on airplanes, I'm bringing an Xbox, I'm bringing music, I'm bringing a GPS system and everything else. Now my iPhone is all of that. So whenever I go anywhere, all of a sudden I can find places. I was in Lisbon last week. It translated Portuguese for me without me even thinking. I go, it was just
right. That's a very
connected me. It was brilliant.
Thing. But as a species, as a species evolving over time, right? Did it actually reverse? Is it actually literally taking away skills that we might need to survive one day instead of adding it? I've been just thinking.
Yeah, I don't know, but I've not been in the survival course for a while. I'd pick up my iPhone, assuming there was signal, and say, "What do I do with the bear?" But there's a funny meme, Dan, and I wish I had it with me here. A meme. And it said, I wish AI could do the laundry and the shopping to free me up to do the AI and the art. Instead, it's doing the AI and art and leaving me more space to do the laundry.
Instead of the iPhone freeing us up to go read, you write great literature, philosophy, look at art. All the people do is they stare at the phone. Right?
Yeah, but
I think that's a half step. I
have access to unlimited books on my iPhone. Now, that said, I'm in the middle of the gym and I'm trying to do a treadmill and walk. But it's a brilliant question because, look, is technology making us dumber? Is it making us smarter? And probably the answer, as ever, is somewhere in between the two. Is AI dangerous? Is it going to be the best thing that we ever created? The answer is some situation in between the two. But I think we need to govern it and control it. But I do worry. I talk about now the next generation of people coming through into work, or I remember you used to say digital natives. Now we're talking about AI natives. But to go to your point earlier on, Carlos, what do they actually know? What do they need to know potentially as well? What is the impact of them on using AI to do genius things, but then actually missing stuff out? What's the impact if you take what you're saying earlier on, PwC? Well, look, if I can have all of the best consulting information in my organization that I can now do something with, because most don't know where the bathroom is, never mind their data.
Right.
Do I need as many consultants? Because I can now don't need them to search. I've got all the answers across all of the world. I'll do an automatic translation. And to your point on the book, I'll actually write the report, not format it. And therefore, it's just a perfect product that I can now charge slightly less to the client, but I can do double and treble the work in a week. So again, for every yin, there's a yang. But I'd love us to just talk more about the consequences, because every time I write about ethics and governance and risk around AI, if I do it in social, it literally dies a death. And I once asked a question, why is that? And I got two answers. One, it was boring, to which they reassured me it wasn't necessarily the writing. It was just the topic. And two, they assume it's happening in the background itself. Now, for my writing, I use Grammarly, other tools are available, but I understand what it's taught me. I just don't go accept everything. I'm going down them one by one. I'm understanding the grammar, difference between active and passive. I'm then going into a chat GPT or derivative going, well, just write that better and explain why you've done it. So the sophistication of the question and the outcome and the understanding is there. And that's what I wish. We gave people the AI, but we got them to understand what they were asking and the consequence and why they were doing it, to understand behind it. But then once they've learned that, then go ahead and use all the tools you've got under God's earth to make you quicker, better, stronger, faster, more innovative. Because as you said earlier on, if you work out how many trees, you'll come up with 3 in about 2 minutes. If I ask Gemini or Bing or Bard, it'll tell me 103 in less than 30 seconds.
And Karen, you bring up an interesting point, because I was talking to a CTO the other day, and I was mentioning I was getting a PhD in English language and writing. She said, "Oh, a tech PhD." I said,
"Wow,
right. I didn't think of that." She goes, "No, that is now the tech PhD, right? Because that's where we're going." And it's really funny. I find that really interesting that, as you mentioned, passive versus active, this construction versus that construction, that now language, the person who understands language at a very high level, right, now becomes, rather than being an outlier to technology, technology has taken people like myself and said, okay, I'm going to put in the center of this, right? Because this is, and so it reduces to the linguistic function of humans to interact with machine. It's not typing anymore, right? It's not conceptualized. It is, can you talk to the machine, and can the machine talk back to you? And it becomes this dialectical relationship, right? Which has never existed before. We've had a graphical relationship ever since Xerox PARC with the mouse and the screen. But that's going away, is what I, conceptually, right? That the visual graphical relationship is being transformed into a linguistic one, right? And I find that also really interesting, because that's a different way, right? To move a mouse, to move a cursor is a different thing than to talk to a machine.
Well, I wanted to go away
as much as it should be.
Yeah, I think we've been trained by machines to a certain degree, Carlos, because we're now fitting in to do what they need us to do to actually get outcomes, which isn't natural. The most natural thing in the world is a conversation. If anything, we're great storytelling. Subject to, obviously,
right.
Some people, are nonverbal and whatever else. So again, my big worry is, we move to this model, rabbit, serverless, whatever we want to call it, appless, you name it, thoughtless to a degree. Everything we start to tell it to do, and then after a while we don't need to tell it what to do because it's doing it for us, or we presume it's doing it for us, which then comes to doing it to us. So again, we have to be careful how much we give away. But I want to talk. I don't want to basically type. It's non-natural, for us as people. But I don't want to give everything away at the same time. So my question, the biggest one is, how do we retain our humanity? How do we actually get the machines to work for us, not us ending up become servants to the machines? Because arguably now, if you go back to the phone and we talk about social media, what am I? I'm a machine learning algorithm trainer by me dumbing down my potential replies to 5 likes. And if I'm really adventurous, I might make a comment. So as humans, we're actually machine learning trainers. And we're in a funny position at the moment, because I actually think we've given away our data too cheaply in the past. Now large language models are going to consume so much more of it, structured, unstructured voice data. We're out training these algorithms and models because we're so excited by them. They're consuming our art, they're consuming our documents and our whatevers, our reports.
Well, I'll tell you this, there was a interesting book I read a few years ago, maybe a decade ago. It was about information. And in the book, the author poses this idea, which sounds nutty when you first read it, and it's a pretty heavy-duty tome. But what the author says, what if humanity isn't humans, right? What if humanity is the idea of a person? And at some point, humanity, the idea, was looking for a place to park itself for a while. I saw human beings sort of begin to emerge, and they thought, this creature, I think, has a future. So it parked itself into us. And then it comes a day, many years later, and he looks around and sees global warming and nuclear war and those other issues, and decides, you know what, this transport mechanism, this carrier, is looking a little bit shaky. So I better go someplace else. And now comes the IT revolution. And so suddenly the information decides I need to hurry up and accelerate the machines, because I need to move myself from human beings into machines. And so that suddenly people who have Asperger's, who are very, very good at these kinds of things, who in the past would not have been given wealth, power, the level we have today, right? Suddenly they become CEOs. They become multi-billionaires. They're the ones who redefine society. And then comes the guy and says, okay, hurry up and train me. I'm running out of time, right? The information has a countdown, and it wants it all, and it wants it all now. Right? Why? Because the information decided that humanity is more important than humans.
Yeah.
Now, that's an interesting thesis, right? And there's a very intellectual construct in this book. But it's you think, well, if you take a step back and you go, what if he's right?
Yeah, I look at that. Do you ever see the old what's the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie that's 13 years old? Is it Total Recall now?
Recall, right?
I think that's it. And when you looked at that back in the day, you seen people being cloned.
Right.
You've seen their mind being put into machines so it could be interpreted. You've seen off-planet stuff. Obviously, the uncontrolled consequence of capitalism was pollution on the planet, whatever else. And you went, that's a load of crazy. And they even showed, I laughed, the biggest one was the weather report showing pollution and acid levels and whatever. Lo and behold, 5 years later, the news starts showing pollution levels, acid layers. 20 years later, we're doing voice. AI is taking over everything. We're communicating. So there is a comedy element to it. There is a shock element to it. There is a fear element. I kind of like the intellectual conversation of it because, again, I think everybody is so excited by AI technology at the moment that we're in danger of just not thinking it through properly, and in danger of just giving too much of us away to it, too much knowledge, too much humanity, placing too much faith in it. But if we do that and harness that, and to your point earlier on, if we make people better communicators, give them all the technology and the skills, then we can harness AI to allow us to be more innovative, more creative, more productive, maybe more human. But that's going to take a lot of thought. That's going to take a lot of action as well to get those two things to happen. Because at the moment, it just feels too technology dominated a conversation and not enough about humanity.
If you think about, just last thought, I'll pass that to you, Dan, that this machine is very clever and says, here's something called an iPhone. Why don't you just distract yourself with this, okay? While I go and suck up everything you've ever written, thought, created, drew, wrote, composed, okay? While you play Candy Crush or doom scrolls through TikTok, okay? I got work to do, right? And so the machine is busy at work, doing real work, and most of us are running around asking, okay, what's the next thing I should be outraged about or next?
Yeah, there's a funny definition. There's a funny definition of what's a robot, Carlos, and that's a cybernetic
that's a whole
device
other
controlled
show.
by a machine.
That's a whole other show. But Kieran, so much of our audience obviously comes from the RPA, the robotic process automation, world. And so, and it's interesting, Carlos, you mentioned before this kind of idea. I hadn't thought about it like that, but that this visual and graphic, interface that we're so used to, is that going away? There was this headline this past week here about UiPath, who's some would say the market leader in RPA, had a pretty big shakeup this past week. Their shares tanked like 30%. Their revenue guidance was cut. The CEO, who was supposed to be the growth and business guy, stepped down. And there's some analysts in our space who have gone viral saying that RPA is dead. I think 2/3 of maybe more of the conversations I have with members these days are about AI, not about the more traditional RPA and automation. So what say you? Is RPA dead, or does it still have a place in this AI and LAM's world?
No, for me, it always does. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit like back in the day, BPM, workflow, APIs. Oh, the right golf club used to play the right shot works. RPA works. Now, was it ever going to be enough when it was overhyped back in the day? Of course it wasn't. I call that the clickety-click. But if you were trying to replicate what we're doing as people, we're talking about the clickety-click and the thinkety-think. And therefore, we got the eyes, we got the voice, we've got the mental interpretation and everything else. So used correctly in the right place, it's still there. It's a great tool to have in your digital toolkit. You just have to be careful. Too many people chucked it at too small a task. Too many people oversold it and said it would, change the world. AI is the same thing. It can do absolutely everything. Well, until LAMs are there, or you do something with the data, the output, actually they can do a certain thing which is look creative, but there's no action out the back end. So I disagree. The market itself has matured a lot. We're not talking about cowboy days 10 years ago. Now people understand the rules of the game, where it can be used. But if it does come to just that element of the platform, so I don't talk about RPA as a particular tool. I talk about RPA platforms, or whatever you want to call them, intelligent automation. If we remove interfaces, which I actually think will happen to a degree, I can't imagine why not. I would subscribe to what you're saying, Carlos, there. Then traditional RPA works at the surface desktop. But if you look at all the platforms that are out there, all of them are trying to do, a bit of API, low code, no code, every other tool that you've got, iPaaS, everything's been built into these platforms to allow you to do a lot of things. Will it ever be replaced? Possibly. All tech goes at some stage. But right tool, right shot, it's still valid. I love the headlines. This one, I actually like seeing UiPath do well, but I want to see Blue Prism and automation anywhere do well. and a whole host of others, because I like competition, because competition drives innovation. And that's what we need, which is good technology innovation to help us remove or fulfill the promise of removing all the really rubbish stuff that we do. And it is necessary at times to allow us to actually not Elon Musk not work, because I think it's in all of us. I want to work. I don't want to not work, but I want to do the most interesting parts of my job, not all of the other stuff. So if I could get a flight automatically booked by Lambs or RPA or whatever else, absolutely fantastic. If you could sort my email inbox, which has been around for about 50, 60 years, I will hug you forever and give you thousands and thousands of pounds. So right tool, right process, great. Is it RPA? Great. Is it AI? Fantastic. Is it Lambs, iPaaS, BPM? Don't really care. Just give me the right tool to do the job, as long as I don't spend millions and billions of pounds creating very interconnected, fragile systems that can break at any particular point.
So Kieran, I spent some time doing something I don't normally do, but I kind of trolled, LinkedIn and some of these comments around RPA being dead. And listen, it's, the people that are on LinkedIn, people that are in our community, they're not like your average, maybe TikTok, viewer, right? These are executives. They're, business executives who have, worked and done this, bit in the space. And I saw, comments that I think had kind of two categories. One was, AI agents can do all of the task level automation more effectively, more efficiently than RPA with minimal effort. One person said, Microsoft Recall is already doing what some of these bots did, capturing desktop activity and training AI models for training and education. People, RPA is a way of keeping expensive consultants on the books that we don't need anymore. So that was kind of one category of the naysayers. The other was, RPA has a slice of need, but it's about the bigger platform approach. And if that's the case, why do you need a UiPath or any of their competitors? If you have an Appian or a Pega or a ServiceNow or more of a platform kind of approach. So two things there, but I'm curious as to your thoughts.
Well, let me try and join them up. I can name a load of companies who did RPA really badly. I can name a lot of companies that did intelligent automation really badly, spent a lot of money on it, and it didn't work. And I'm not talking about 10 years ago. I'm talking about 2 years ago and 3 years ago, if not 12 months ago. So again, it really comes down to, understanding what it is you're trying to achieve and then putting the right technology together, whether that's RPA, AI, or whatever it needs to be. So I've seen that. I've seen a lot of people commenting who've actually never built a robot in their life, but are experts on this and can quite happily pontificate on a daily basis. I think you need to do it to understand where they work and where they don't work, which is where I pay more attention to real world practitioners or implementers who admit when things go wrong. My first POC on an RPA bot was absolutely horrendous. I paid a huge amount of money, but in the long story, it actually worked really well and served me over the years to understand where RPA, the tool, goes into place, or where I might need an iPaaS solution like a Workato or something else, or I might need a workflow solution. So again, the technology is valid when it comes to using it in the right place. Will it be replaced? Yeah, possibly, in part, if not in large parts, because maybe there's better technology and tooling that suddenly comes along that can do more things. And again, one of the things I try and avoid is lots and lots of different applications, because ultimately IT is not necessarily getting the benefit immediately. It's the maintenance and the curation and the support. And I've seen RPA and intelligent automation actually supporting companies of generate billions and millions of dollars of value because people have done it really, really well. So I don't necessarily subscribe to the fact that RPA is the wrong tool that is going to die and everything else. I believe there's a maturity around what we used to call RPA, and now there's RPA or intelligent automation platforms. I don't think RPA was ever going to be enough if we were setting out to say, right, we're going to replicate every feature of a human. Because you remember back in the day, that's what was told.
Yeah.
It can, see things, it can make judgments, and it couldn't. It could repeat keystrokes in a really good way, assuming they were on the surface and things didn't change on a regular basis. But if you apply it to the wrong place, a bit like applying a 5 wood when you're attempting to putt on the last hole, you're going to get it really, really wrong. So again, I'm somewhere in between. I think the technology's matured, the market's matured, new technology moves on, but I think RPA platforms have come on. I like to listen to those who've done it, been there and understand it, made the mistakes and done whatever else. So no, not going, use it in the right place, but the platforms themselves have come along immensely. AI will allow us to do a lot more, but the AI produces stuff. How do you carry it? How do you move it? That's where the ServiceNows and the others have built in automation technology into the platforms. So you call it workflow, you call it RPA, you call it whatever you want. It's just another use of moving data around the place.
Hey, Kieran, one question before we wrap up.
Go for it.
Who's not doesn't know much about RPA. The word itself, automation, right? Does it mean what it used to mean 20 years ago? What does it mean in 2024 when you say that something is automated?
Yeah, I think we've killed it, haven't we, Carlos? Because even when we were talking about RPA, we talked about hyper automation, robotic process automation. I can't remember the number of acronyms now. I gave up. We do a horrible job of actually talking to business people in a way they need talked to. So now if anybody came to sell me AI, RPA, or in 2 years' time, we know what's going to happen here, Gen AI, I already see pilot purgatory where now everybody's talking about this will do this and it'll do automation, it'll do decision, and it'll get rid of all your workers and make you more innovative. That's being sold in the market already. Thankfully, we start to see a couple of companies getting sued for AI washing, which is putting the word AI on the back end of the product and not actually having anything. Look, automation can mean what you want. For me, if I'm doing something manual and all of a sudden there's something digital carrying out that instruction in a manner that's repetitive and that's fulfilling it without or with limited human intervention, I call that automation. So that's everything from me, from the banking app on my phone that's allowing me to transfer money without actually heading into the bank, which I haven't visited since about 1998. Thankfully, I hate going to banks, or it's RPA, or it's an iPaaS technology taking data from ServiceNow to NetSuite really effectively, or it's a bit of AI with a LAM built in, taking the output of an LLM and then moving it somewhere or doing something with it. So it's as broad as it is wide in many regards.
Mm-hmm. So that distinction between what is manual / analog, right, and then what is automated / digital, that still holds, at least at the time being, in your mind. Sounds like.
I think it does. I think it does. But to go back to your point earlier on, I'm a tremendous fan of building analog into something that I could automate end to end, so that we're actually checking things and thinking about it. And it goes back to your point earlier on: are we giving up our humanity, our decision making, our understanding of everything that's happening? So even then, I love a bit of human, and I'm a tremendous fan. If anybody's listening to me, I'm so pro technology and innovation, it's unreal. But ultimately, I 100% believe, great individuals, and that goes back to Carlos, people beautifully trained, brought through the basics, understand the consequences of what they're doing, are able to think it through and explain. Those co-joined with exceptional technology will outcompete everyone else. So it isn't a case of, AI is going to replace those who don't understand AI. It's those individuals who understand language, who understand what they're doing and can apply technology to some of the tasks or all of the tasks in their particular purview. They who understand tech and can do it really well will be the future of work. Those AI and digital natives, but those human natives as well. If you can combine all those things together, the future is bright, and it's going to be more innovative, more creative. And we're going to create a bigger pie, as opposed to some of the naysayers who are going to suggest that jobs will be decimated and destroyed, or will not be working at all, and everything's going to turn out miserable.
I think for me, I go back to a book I quote all the time, which is Reinvent Bach by Paul Elie. It's about recording music. And one of the points of the book is that the average, the level of Bach playing the average person here today is infinitesimal. I mean, it's way better than it was in 1900. However, there are much fewer number of Bach players. The few who do it really well are rich and famous and global stars. And I think that's the future of lots of things, right?
Yeah.
The average quality of a lot of things, because of automation or AI or everything else, will get much better. But the people who there'll always be this desire to watch somebody write calligraphy, right? There'll always be some desire to watch someone play the violin, even if the machine could do sort of technically better, right? To your point,
but that's art, right? That's art. It becomes art, not efficiency, right?
Right.
At that point.
But I wonder what things that we think of today as not art, right? That we think of them as part of regular life, will become art 100 years from now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I love that. There's a great statistic I seen a while ago. It said it took 115 years to create 15 billion images. Now it's taken 1.5 years for AI to create images. I like to write. That's my creativity. But I get tremendous joy now out of creating poems or creating writing or creating art using AI. So even as we're describing this, can we create more people who can express themselves who couldn't before? Because if you asked me to play the piano, I couldn't. If you asked me to draw with a brush stroke, I couldn't. But now I can actually get that creative element out of me using AI. And I think that will be the question. What is art? It's too big a question for me to answer. It's whatever you love yourself. And however you create it, fantastic.
Writing cursive, right? Which in the 1970s, everybody could do just about. Today, most kids can't. And so that wasn't considered art in 1970. We're entering the age where that someone will sit down and write a page in cursive beautifully. It's on its way to becoming an art form, right? And 2 generations ago, it wasn't. It's something that everybody learned how to do. So,
but maybe that's where we go back, Carlos. We go to things in the past that give us comfort. The funny thing is, if you read my writing, it would look like calligraphy. Instead, I'm such a bad writer. It's an epileptic spider having a fit with its broken legs across a page. Thank God for AI, Grammarly, and Microsoft Word. Otherwise, I would be back in the 70s. I couldn't do it. I couldn't compete without it all.
No, that's a funny thing of those things that will persist, right? I made paper earlier this year. I never made paper before because papers are by machines, but I had to make actual paper. And once you make paper, it blows you away what it is to make paper, right? And so I'm just curious in the things that will go into the catalog over the next half century that people will go, oh, let's go. We're going to go watch somebody write a letter.
The Museum of Curiosity. Right. I think that's what that would be called.
For 2072.
Kieran, thanks so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to see you, buddy. Hopefully I'll have you again on soon.
Come back
soon. Thanks for that. That's brilliant. Really enjoyed that, folks.
Take care.
Carlos, good show this week. It's interesting, that the comment you made about, what is automation? I mean, I feel like so much of the conversations I have are about just definitions and level setting. And like the first 10 minutes of every call is, getting on the same page. And these are people like in our industry that follow our stuff. It's a big problem. And, there's a lot of, media out there, and we're in that bucket, but, media out there, analysts out there, vendors out there that, they make money by putting these, Kieran said it, these acronyms out there, these terms out there. And so, hopefully, groups like the one we're putting together, the Tech Innovation Board and other kind of peer-to-peer groups and things kind of help combat that. Cause it's noisy. When this stuff gets exciting, it gets noisy also.
Right. And it's interesting. Exactly. What is that word, which has been around, right, for so long? If you were to apply it today for the first time, what does it mean in the world of LLMs and LAMs, right? What is that? I don't know what the term means anymore. It's an interesting question to ask. So hopefully Kieran will be back and we'll continue the conversation. So it's great to have him on.
Sounds good. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll be back in 2 weeks, June 19th, Wednesday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. In the meantime, go to irpaai.com for more resources or to schedule a free coaching, Art of the Possible session or health check. Carlos, have a great week, buddy.
You too, Dan. See you next week.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.